My name's Carrie Shaw. I'm a medical illustrator, and I'm the CEO and founder of Embodied Labs. 10 years ago, I was starting my freshman year in college, and my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. From that moment on, I wondered what she was experiencing in her world, and I felt like if I could somehow better understand that, I could more effectively care for her. And my mom also happened to have a left visual field impairment, and it was about 5 years later when I was living at home as one of her primary caregivers that I was tasked with hiring her first home health aides. And so at that time, I said, here's what her left visual field deficit means. It's not that she can't see out of her left eye like this, it's so that she can't see out of the left halves of both eyes. And then I watched the CNA's eyes kind of glaze over like all of yours just have. And so I decided, you know what? Let me solve this. So I created these goggles. I said, here, put these on. And so they could immediately understand what my mom was seeing. The fact that she would eat exactly half of her plate of food at mealtime finally made sense to them. And this discovery really empowered them to more effectively care for her. They knew to protect this side of her body, and that's why her balance was bad over there, and that if they wanted her to see things, they needed to go on this side. And so from there, I saw that just by being able to step into this one aspect of my mom's condition, visualizing her experience really improved her health care. But I said, these goggles really have one flaw. They can't simulate the complexity of the human experience of what Alzheimer's disease or other conditions really are. So I went on and studied public health as an undergrad and launched into health education for several years, literally launched myself into the Peace Corps in the Dominican Republic, where I found myself living in the southwestern corner of the island, wondering why I'm here and what have I done. I didn't understand the language yet. I didn't understand the culture, and I was there to teach reproductive health to teenagers. In this picture, these are some of my best friends, these young ladies. They would come over to my house because I had all of the markers you could imagine and paper to color. And really this ability to draw and depict visuals of health became my one tool that I could share to really achieve what I come there to do, which was to empower people to understand their health. Just seeing how visuals could cut through any kind of cultural, language, or educational barriers. And I was so excited about this, I wound up going back to school eventually for a Master's of Science in Medical Illustration. So this is a picture from me very happy in my gross anatomy class, where I was dissecting cadavers alongside the first-year medical students at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and really just saw that you can take art and science and then technology, put them together and find new ways to really teach ourselves about our health like we had never seen before. And it was during grad school that I had the opportunity to choose any research topic that I wanted for my thesis. So of course, I returned to this question that was still nagging me. My mom was now a couple years away from passing away from her disease in late stages of Alzheimer's, and I was even more annoyed than ever that I could not figure out what her brain was doing and why it was doing that, and how could I imagine her experience. I just started with the basic question of, if we can step into the patient's perspective, could this make us more effective healthcare providers? And I had a couple discussions with medical educators at UIC, and I remember one of them said to me something that really inspired what we wound up creating, which was, how do you get a 24-year-old medical student to understand what it's like to be someone 60 years older than themselves? And so I decided to take this question as kind of the foundation for what I would prototype and what I would build. And I had never heard of virtual reality before. I had no idea how I was going to do this, but I started asking around. I first met Tom Leahy, who is now my co-founder, as all of these lovely people are, and we started prototyping a solution. So at the time, I was really interested in Jeremy Bailenson work on embodied cognition and immersive environments, Skip Rizzo's work on emotionally intelligent avatars to be used in post-traumatic stress disorder therapy. And I said, okay, let's create a desktop simulation, kind of first-person shooter. We'll lay in these different kinds of really common audio and visual impairments. And we made an all CG world where you were embodying an avatar and interacting within this world. And it was awful. Like, we hated what we created. Ugh. It didn't feel human. You felt a distance between yourself and the desktop and the human experience. The avatars were, of course, CG. It was hard to relate to them. But the one really good thing that came out of that awful prototype was that we happened to have a development kit for the very first Oculus Rift headset, and we put the world we made into it. And as soon as I put on that headset, I said, Tom, virtual reality is the medium with this unique potential to accurately simulate the patient's perspective and other worlds. And so that's when Ryan came on the team. He is a virtual reality filmmaker, a background in theater and storytelling. And we said, what if we could pull in live action video and this sort of real-time rendered interactivity and make something that still does this embodied projection of these experiences? And so what we wound up creating was our first embodied experience. And we call it We Are Alfred. It's a 7-minute live action, fictional, interactive story. As you embody Alfred, you meet his family, you hear their concerns about his health. Alfred goes to the doctor, takes a cognitive test, and then gets a diagnosis. And I'm just going to jump in and show you just a few of the first minutes of this experience. And I will see you back in reality shortly. All right, is everybody with me virtually / really? Great. So I've been transported into Alfred's dining room. There's this black spot in the center of my vision, and that's simulating macular degeneration, which is the most common visual impairment in Americans over 65. So there's 12 million people that are living today with this condition. And as my family is singing happy birthday to me, it's my 74th birthday, I'm kind of struggling to hear because like 15 million people Alfred's age, he has high frequency hearing loss. So of course, as he's daydreaming, making this birthday wish that before he blows out the candles, he's kind of lost in thought in this other world of a place where he really can see and hear again. And so here, we're just seeing how virtual reality can create these immersive worlds where if you feel present in them, our minds really perceive the limitations of our own bodies and then say, whatever's happening in this world is actually happening to me in real life. And so that's how embodied cognition can really affect a very powerful kind of socio-emotional learning. And so then Alfred's kind of thrown back into reality. He's realized that he's actually knocked over this wine glass, and then the things that unfold from here are that his family has this really difficult conversation with him. They say, we've noticed things have changed in your health. We're concerned about you. We'll go with you to the doctor. We just really want to help you figure this out. I really wanted to, in building this experience, highlight what happens before patients walk into their doctor's office to really help people think about the story and of everybody that they're seeing. And this isn't just someone coming in to look at their pathology and their impairments, but really they're a whole being that is complex and is there with much more than what can be covered in a 7 or 15-minute visit. All right, so cliffhanger. This is a screen from the following parts of the experience. You actually have to physically interact and try and take a cognitive test with this central vision loss. And then later, the doctor gives Alfred hearing aids and your hearing returns to normal. In creating this experience, we said, all right, this is powerful. It's a 80 gigabyte executable file. But how do we actually get this somewhere so that people can watch it and learn from it and use it in their academic training and in their professional training? First, we created this learning framework, 3 stages. Prepare what you do before you go into virtual reality, embody the things that you're doing inside the headset, and reflect either inside the headset or outside in a facilitated discussion. And then within this framework, we launched it by creating a very simple application that lets students or professionals log in, take a pretest to create a baseline assessment of what they know, looking at things like interests in geriatrics as a specialty, perceived importance of using tools like this for their training, attitudes towards the aging population, and then they can go into these embodied experiences like the one I just showed you. And so we actually tested We Are Alfred with the University of Illinois College of Medicine with 91 of their second-year students. We had them all go through this experience and then go into their geriatrics workshop, and then later did a focus group through their Department of Medical Education. Some of my favorite observations are here in this slide. Before students started the experience, they were given in their prepare section just a brief summary that said, you're about to embody a 74-year-old who has the most common audio and visual impairments, macular degeneration, and hearing loss. And without fail, about, I would say, 9 out of 10 people get in the headset and they say, something's wrong with this headset, I can't see. What is this? Or, can you please turn up the volume? I'm having trouble hearing. I just think that's a wonderful illustration of the disconnect between reading something and experiencing it for yourself. And then as they went on, they realized, oh, right, this is part of the experience. I love especially with medical students, seeing them experience this frustration of trying to complete a cognitive test. I had this one girl have an aha moment where she said, I just didn't think about how here I am in Alfred's shoes. I have complete functioning cognitive abilities, yet I'm still struggling to do these things because of these vision and hearing impairments. So it really drove home that difference between thinking about what a sensory impairment is versus a cognitive impairment, and how you have to really look at the patient as a whole to accurately diagnose them. The last thing that was really interesting to observe was throughout the course of the experience, the way that people's posture changed. So initially you start out and you're really straining forward, you're trying to hear, sometimes turning your head, leaning in with the spatial audio, and then during the daydream, people wouldn't even really realize that they could see and hear. It was just this fun, playful scene and, picking flowers, really enjoying themselves, but then thrown back into Alfred's experience, again, just straining and kind of struggling. And then at the very end of the experience, the doctor tells Alfred, I noticed you were struggling to hear. Let me give you these hearing aids. And as the students reach out and take them and put them on, they can hear normally, and they always would just kind of relax and sit back and say, oh, okay, that's so much better, and now I get it. And I think those are really great examples of how augmenting our perception in virtual reality can really lead to some interesting and meaningful outcomes. And just in terms of some of the data we collected, we asked, describe what you think of when you hear geriatric or older adult or aging. And we looked at those words and saw this huge decrease in stereotyping. So thinking about the people and kind of these overall arching blanket statements like old or white hair, or even good things like wise, to really trying to dissect that out and say complex things about who these people are. We saw a little bit of an increase in interest to pursue geriatrics as a specialty. That's something we're still tracking with some of our longitudinal studies. We saw that students self-reported that embodying a patient in VR gave them skills that were really important to their future career. And this is a quote from the focus group that was conducted where someone said, spending 7 minutes as Alfred was the most meaningful part of my entire geriatrics course. And there was this unanimous vote that they wanted more simulations like this one, and that all of their classmates should go through this experience, which we wound up actually fulfilling. The instructor said, well, if the students say it, then we got to do it. So everyone in that second year class wound up going through this. And I just know I'm close enough to having been in grad school, and I watched these students come through kind of rolling their eyes that they were spending about 10 minutes of extra time having to do this. And I just feel so proud to see that I was able to crack our toughest critics and hear that this was indeed valuable to the students. But one thing that did keep coming up was that students kept saying, who is Alfred? And, I felt all these different emotions while I was embodying this fictional person, but, who does he represent? And so to address that, we created a companion piece to We Are Alfred called At the Peripheral, which is this 7-minute nonfiction immersive documentary. And we followed 6 people with macular degeneration and hearing loss in the Chicago community. Ryan and I started attending community events where we met this man named Tom Persky, who is vice president of the Chicago Lighthouse. And Tom has a juvenile form of macular degeneration. So he had been living his whole life since his 20s with Alfred's condition. He actually tried We Are Alfred and kind of compared his vision with what we were simulating. And through Tom, we followed patients in their low vision exams. We went to Tom's house. He's an avid bike rider, so we convinced him to ride around with our camera in his hand as though he didn't have enough that he was trying to figure out and navigate. He really told us, how he navigates the world, lives life to the fullest, and then helps others through the Chicago Lighthouse to go through vision rehab to really overcome these conditions. In that experience, we also, given my medical illustration background, really brought in the pathology to say, here's the human with the condition, but let's fly inside of an eyeball, and why don't you, as the optometrist is explaining the progression from dry to wet AMD, you can actually watch it unfold around you. You can see the optic nerve, you can watch the blood vessels change, and then you can actually turn around and look back out of the eye and see how that's changing over time. We were prototyping and testing this and created this final piece that we're still developing today called Story Bridge. So kind of from the beginning, the challenge has been we all want empathy to be something that our healthcare providers have. We want to teach it, we want to instill it in everyone. But then when it comes to what has to be taught in a short period of time or what can be shown as a bottom line return on investment, it's harder to quantify. And so StoryBridge is something that we made to start to really try and quantify what's happening in these experiences. You basically are exposed to these blocks, which you build into a mind map all around you in virtual space, and you take the people that you met, the roles that they have, and link them with different kinds of communication skills and actions that they took. And as you're building those connections, we're linking that back to learning objectives for a curriculum or for a corporate training and saying, here's what happened while you were learning in VR without having to have that pre-post kind of old world assessment fit a new technology. And so this has just been a really exciting piece to continue to build into our software and our platform. And this again just kind of shows you the mechanics of the game. You take a screenshot when you're done, and then you get a report that shows you exactly what happened. Going forward, we're so excited to continue to develop our first suite of content around geriatric education. We're about to release a lab where you embody somebody with Alzheimer's disease, getting back to why I started this company in the first place. And then we're going to move on and create suites of content around diversity issues in healthcare, learning from the child's perspective. What do learning disabilities look like? A suite of content around mental health issues. And at the same time, we're bringing in content creators that are already out there making awesome things to be able to share that forward too. We had this opportunity to be a part of a hackathon for medical empathy solutions at the University of Southern California. And we wound up winning this competition and presenting to the Keck School of Medicine there. And what the executive director really said that struck me was, this app is going to change how we treat patients by providing an immersive experience that ultimately creates emotional intelligence and more compassionate care. And I think that's a really beautiful way to summarize the goal of what we're creating at Embodied Labs. And then just a story about what we've been doing even in the last few weeks. We brought our whole platform into several high schools to look at how this might work in the 9 through 12 audience. And we've been testing how we can not just share this with one student sitting with one hardware set and one computer, but bring it to a whole classroom at the same time, kind of like I was able to bring to you all when I put on that headset just now. And so we had the students go through all these experiences as they were alternating putting on the headset, and at the same time kind of pausing to have discussions about what they were learning. They were saying, what is hearing impairment? How do you talk to somebody that has it? What did I feel just now when I was experiencing it? And after that class ended, this 9th grade student waited till everybody left, and then she came up to her teacher, and she had hearing aids in both of her ears, and she said, it meant so much to me that my classmates were able to hear just like I do, and that we were able to have a discussion about how to communicate with people that have hearing impairments, and that they could really feel what this is like for me. And she had tears in her eyes, and she said, thank you so much for doing this. I think that's a wonderful note to end on when I say that embodied human experiences are the future of education and healthcare training, and our team at Embodied Labs can't wait to bring them to the forefront of the workforce development training. Thank you.